welcome to More Than Refresh, the T3D sessions. Today we have Command Prompt's resident caffeinated squirrel. Actually, you're decaf now, aren't you?
No, I still drink caffeine, just not the volume.
Not the volume. He no longer does gallons, folks. He's learned a little bit of temperance. Justin, what are we talking about today?
Well, that it'll be full logging and the necessity of it. Everybody has monitoring. Everybody says, "Oh, monitoring." But they always forget about logging, and they think that having full logging will hurt performance. There is some truth to that, but not generally speaking. Unless you are on like a 1-core, 2-core environment, you're not going to see a performance hit if you have full logging.
Yeah, I mean, any kind of true production environment. One, we should preface this by saying that monitoring is all about the problem after it happens, right?
Or are you to catch it?
Logging is
to catch the environment.
Yeah, and the logging is all about knowing why it's happening.
Right.
But more importantly, even with that, there's so many ways that you can make logging not hurt. I mean, asynchronous logging right there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So...
but there's a few gotchas with Postgres when it comes to full logging. Well, the standard config for Postgres' logging is to use standard out or standard error. And that, unfortunately, if you had a full load server, your server's starting to get up to around 80 or 90% CPU load, the log will start dropping off. It'll stop dropping it. It doesn't work, and you'll start losing details. But that's only if you get to the top end of that situation. The reason why I advocate for full logging is, as we said, monitoring tells you, hey, it's breaking right now. But why is it breaking? Because again, all the monitoring tools, Datadog, AWS CloudWatch, they all attach to PGStatStatements, which tells you the queries that are going on right now, and it tells you what's going on in stat activity. But you see the query, you don't know what the query, what the parameters are. That's all. You're all blind to that. The only place that's recorded is in the logs, and you need that desperately to say, okay, why is this query now eating up all the CPU cycles? Why am I seeing this? And that always comes up. So when you figure out how to get the problem to go away, and that's what monitoring really helps you do, now you got to figure out why the problem happened. And if you don't have full logging, you're completely blind. You have no idea what's going on. And if you have a query that's going insane on you, actively, you can't get to the parameters to see why is this query going to 1 second and then suddenly going to 100 milliseconds or going to 10 seconds. I see this lots of times with clients where they'll have a query that just goes stupid, and they can't figure out why. We were at one environment, a client was seeing a huge high load, and this was a decent environment. It was a 48 CPU environment, and they had only 80 active sessions. You'd think there'd be more than enough resources. That's usually follows the ratio of number of connections to your CPU load, or your number of CPUs. All those rules weren't being broken, but they were pegged out. They were pegged out at 90%. And the only way we found out what the problem was when we went to the parameters, it was all coming from just roughly 30 sessions were running the same query over and over again, and it wouldn't go away. The only way we knew that is because we had to go in and had to go into AWS, go into the config, crank up the logging so we can then go say, oh, those are the parameters that we can see. We had to turn full logging on. They don't want to do full logging. They don't want to do the record retention. They don't want to do all the other environment. But that was the only way to find it. It's like this specific client, their app broke, and it was sending the same query 100 times. It was just loading the system up, and it would use up all the sessions.
From a business continuity perspective, this is important because, okay, you don't want to pay for full logging, whether it be money or whether it be load, okay? But how much did it cost you for us to diagnose a problem, to realize we need full logging, to log into AWS, which is a pain in the ass in general, enable full logging, go through the AWS tools to review the full logging, to then diagnose all of it, to find the one query, right? How long, how much money did that cost them in comparison? Hours, right? Hours. Impacting business continuity for hours versus just, spending just a little bit more money to make sure they have the resources so that we don't have to worry about that problem.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, you can't in AWS. You have to download. If you're an RDS, and in fact, this is across all the cloud managed SQLs out there. Is you have to have some kind of service that downloads the log for you that you can then process somewhere else. Now, Datadog does that for you, but nobody wants to pay for that.
Right.
CloudWatch does this for you, but nobody wants to pay for it because it gets so expensive. But when you're in a crisis mode, you're more than happy to pay it. And of course, you're in a panic trying to set that up while you're trying to figure out why your server's pegged out in your interruption.
Well, and I mean, this is the same thing for the support contract, right? We run into this all the time. You have clients that, we don't want to pay for a support contract. Well, that's fine.
Right.
But the moment they have to call us Friday, 5:01 p.m. on an emergency, 99 times out of 100, by the next Wednesday, they've signed a support contract,
yes.
Right? Because had they just spent the money up front, right? And it didn't even have to be with us. I don't care who you're doing it with. But if you're doing if you spend a little bit of money up front, you're going to save a crap ton of money on the back end. That's the same thing we're talking about with this full logging.
Yes, it is. Because again, yes, it takes more. It does take more space on the RDS instance, but if you're being proactive about downloading them and keeping that side of it small, because that's one thing you can do is you can say your retention period on the RDS instance is short, so it doesn't eat up a lot of disk space, and then move it somewhere where the disk space is a lot cheaper.
Well, and we could even do things like, I mean, especially when we're talking about RDS, right? You fire up a small EC2 instance that pulls that log every X interval. Right. Processes it for evaluation automatically, and then shoves the log into S3 or even Glacier once we know there's not a problem, right? And then we have a trend of logs that we can access for historical reasons to find out why that one blip happens once a quarter or whatever.
Right. And you can't do that. Clients clients always want us to do this. This involves health checks, performance analysis. You can't do any of that stuff without full logging. You get some idea with PGStatStatements, but you don't know why the query is breaking because you don't have the parameters.
Well, no, and even PGStatStatements is really more about what's going on right now, right? That doesn't tell us what happened 2 hours ago. Right. And you hit the nail on the head, right? This is actually a great topic because it just lends itself to the whole idea is like, a health check, right? We clients come in, we want a health check. And the first thing we say is, okay, well, we need logging. Now, we don't have logging turned on. It's like, okay, well, we need to turn on logging for 2 weeks so we can figure out what's going on with your system.
You're completely blind, and that's a big problem, and because that's the first thing you have to tackle and get over is where are the logs? And they're like, well, I didn't think we needed a log. Logs hurts performance. All this other, no, it doesn't. Back in the spinning disk days, there was some argument, there was some truth to that. But with SSDs, unless you're running on a tiny little 2-core server or something like that. Full logging has no real impact. It's so small. They can get quite huge on a heavy
let's be honest.
server,
If you're on a smaller instance, chances. Well, and this is rude, but it's the truth. If you're on a 2-core instance, your app's not that important, right? It's rude.
I can't argue that,
true, right? It's not that important. What we're talking about people. Well, we're talking about people that employ people, right? We're talking about people's lives, and you're not willing to spend just a little bit to make sure that you are not possibly impacting those lives because you wanted to save $75 a month.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would almost argue, especially for any regulated industry client, and yes, there's rules around logging for regulated industry. We're fully aware of those. That it's almost a break in fiduciary responsibility not to have the logging.
That's something that also surprises me is the number of clients we have to work with who are in the regulated fields that have logging turned off on the database side.
Yeah, we should actually. We can't do it on this episode, but we might want to have an episode specifically about that, because, you know, if their insurance finds out, you know, they're hosered.
Yeah. Well, that's my bit is pushing full logging, and having monitoring also, but full logging, monitoring is useless without full logging. Really is. That's the end of the day.
In the big picture sense, you're absolutely correct. All right, folks, that has been another More Than a Refresh T3D Sessions with Justin. Thank you, sir.